I'm Mike at CyberBlast. Previously we went over the software basics, and now we're going to go into a little more advanced detail. First, we're going to go into the main menu, and we're going to log in with our password. During the installation, you'll get set up with a password. Once you have that, you can change it at any time by clicking the Change Password button, selecting your user, and entering the new password twice. So once we're logged in, there's a few more things we can do. We can adjust the game options, and this is the most commonly used section of the software. This is where you can change game parameters, you can change the player name lists, the team names, and the team colors. So we'll start with the player name list. So first, just pick the list you want to edit, or you can say create a new one. And you can name the list. So a lot of people will have a list for the latest movies, or for a Halloween theme, or they'll have a list for younger kids. And some people will even create a separate list for special birthday parties. So all you have to do is enter the names. And you can enter whatever names you like, and then adjust the colors. So these colors will be the colors of the packs in a solo game. In a team game, the team colors will override this. But it's just controlled using RGB sliders. So if you want to make it more red, move the top slider. Less blue, move the bottom slider back. And then more green, you can move the center slider. Or you can enter a hex code off of the hex wheel from a website. Once you're done, click Save. And we can later select this as we showed you before in the next game screen. The Team Name Manager works very similarly. We can select the list, click Edit, and enter the name we'd like for the team, then adjust the colors. Next we have the game definitions. This is where you can edit the variables that control how the game plays. So in this case, we're going to start with our team game. The standard team and free-for-all games will show up as locked. This is so that only an administrator can change it, not your lower level employees. Once we get here, there's some of these variables are the same in all the different game formats, and some are specific to their format. So the standard variables that you'll always see are the length of the game in seconds, the hide time in seconds, which is the gap at the beginning of the game where the pack lights are still out before players can tag each other. Usually you want this number somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds. And that's to give players time to get out to their base stations before the game starts. The friendly fire checkbox, if this is unchecked, players will not be able to tag their own teammates. If you check it, you will be able to hit your teammates. The heat sensor, if that box is checked, then by default 2 hands will be required on the phaser. Up at the top we have the team game. If you check the team game box, it will automatically divide players into teams. If you don't, it'll be a free-for-all game. And this favorite checkbox makes the game show up in your favorites list. Usually we limit the favorites list to 2 to 4 game formats, so if you have an operator trying to pick a game when you're busy, they're not overwhelmed by too many choices. And it helps control the experience for your players. The game token is how it's identified on that list, and also on the scoreboard later. So it's just a symbol to help people quickly identify the game type. So you can see there's a king for King of the Hill, a zombie for the zombie mode, and the shades is what we use for the VIP game. You can also adjust the color. By default, the colors are coded so that blue means it's a team game, and red means it's a solo game. Up here we have the hit penalty. If you check this box, players will lose points when they're tagged, and you can adjust those values below. Usually it's about a quarter of what they would have gotten for tagging another player. Here are the tag and stun points. A tag is a hit in the chest or the back, and a stun is a hit in the shoulder or the phaser. And below that is the friendly fire penalties. So if you want to turn friendly fire on, but turn the penalties off, you have that option here. The base armor is the number of times it takes to destroy the base. So if you want players to have to tag the base 3 times to destroy it once, set the base armor to 3. You can set that value anything between 1 and 100. Typically 1 to 3 is what people use though. With younger players you might set it to 1. And here you can adjust the base destroyed points and the points for the microblaster targets in the arena, as well as the max bases per player. And this max bases per player number is on a per base basis. So if there are 3 bases in the arena, red, green, and blue, and you set this to 3, red players will be able to tag both the green base 3 times and the blue base 3 times. Next we have the weapons and the roles. So you can control exactly how each weapon works. First, the most popular option here is rapid fire. If you check this box, the phaser will keep firing if you hold the trigger down, without requiring you to release it. If we check the wide angle box, it'll be a photon, which is a 45-degree shot that hits everything in front of you, but it's a little bit shorter range than the normal shot. If we check the shield box, it becomes a shield, and when you activate it, you can't be hit for the shield length below in seconds. The trigger rate is the time between shots. So the units are a little bit funky here. If you hover over it, it'll tell you it's roughly 76. A value of 76 equals about 1 second per shot. So a value of about a quarter of that is 4 shots per second. The same units on the burst rate and the burst count. And the way that works is if you pull the trigger once and you have the burst count set to 3 and the burst rate set to 5, then you'll get 3 burst shots 5 ticks apart. So if we multiply that out, if I pull that trigger once, it's going to fire 3 bursts over about a quarter of a second. Down below this we have the stun time and down time. Stun time is the length you're down when you're tagged in the shoulder or the phaser. Down time is the length you're down when you're hit in the chest or the back. And we've got these numbers at 3 and 5 as a default. Some people prefer to turn them up a little bit, like say 5 and 7. But if you make it too much more than that, players will get frustrated. This return to previous weapon checkbox. Some weapons are pretty powerful and you have limited ammo of them, so you're only going to want to use one at a time. If we check this box, it'll automatically go back to your standard blaster after you use it. Here we can adjust the sounds. So the main ones you might use are these custom sounds here. We have some different ones like a more militaristic style. Our default sounds are very sci-fi, but you do have the option to pick an RPG or a shotgun or something to that effect down here. So that's what you need to know from this tab. The other listings here are the other 4 standard weapons. You can also make your own, but most games have a standard of 4 included. Next we have the roles tab. And here's where you can configure how each pack is loaded out. You can set the maximum number of lives. Typically you want this at 9999, and that effectively means unlimited. If you want to do a limited life respawn game, you might set this somewhere between 1 and 5. And that can be set up so players have to go back to their base station or some other point in the arena every time they lose those 5 lives. The infinite lives checkbox means the player will never run out of lives, so they can always keep tagging regardless of how many lives they have. This is the stealth mode checkbox. If you check that, that player's lights will be out, so they'll be harder to see in the arena. On VIP or members nights, that's a popular game format. You have your elimination checkbox here. If that box is checked, when the player runs out of lives, their game is immediately over. Their pack will say game over and they have to exit the arena. The anti-stalker checkbox is on by default. What it does is it allows players 1/4 of a second as they power back up where they can't be hit. And this just helps to stop one member from following new players around, gives them a fighting chance. Assignable allows you to select the role in the game manager. If this box is not checked, it's used in some game scripting. For instance, in the zombie game, you want the zombies to automatically convert. You don't want people to be assigned a zombie at the beginning. So for your purposes, assignable should always be checked. The roll animation is the secondary lights on the vest. It controls how they fire. This can be used to help identify players in a certain role. For instance, a medic or an artillery person. You might give them a different light pattern in the center. We also use it in Capture the Flag to help identify the flag carrier. You can change the secondary light color here. Some of the patterns will automatically follow the team colors, but most of them will follow the color selected here. And you can change the token. This is the little icon that will show up next to the player on the scoreboard. And the table below is the weapon table. You can set how many weapons and which weapons this role has. So if I wanted this guy to just have your basic weapons, I would uncheck those boxes. If I wanted to limit it to 100 shots, I'd change the blasters to 100. And you can adjust all the variables however you want right here. You'll see as many roles as fit the game here. Normally we only have 1 or 2 roles. That is just about it for the game definition editor. Next, we're going to go on to a couple of other functions that you might need to use. Your gameplay report will show you your gameplay data as far back as you'd like to go. You can choose the start date on the left, end date on the right, and when you've done that, you hit Generate Report. It'll show you full details, the time, the date, the length, the type, and of course the turnover time. This value is the time between when the previous game ended and the next one started. So if you see these numbers getting larger than 4 to 5 minutes on your busy Saturdays, there may be a staff training issue that needs to be corrected. You can also export this data to a CSV file or Microsoft Excel. Just enter the name you want to name it, and you can take it off with a USB flash drive and work on it from your office. There's also a print daily report function. So many facilities, and we do recommend this, will require their manager to print out the daily summary of action and compare it with the cash receipts from the POS system. And there will be some discrepancies. For instance, if an extra grandparent showed up to a birthday party and your policy is to let the grandparents play for free, that's fine. It just needs to be recorded to help avoid internal theft. Another function you might use is in the Arena Config tab. Now this looks overwhelming, there's a lot of boxes, but there's only a few that are used regularly. For instance, this Arena Options. This is where you set your standard default game. Normally it's going to be a team game. Some places want to switch to a free-for-all game though. You can choose your default name list. So if you're in the Halloween season and you want to change the names to a Halloween theme, you could do that here. And just when the month of October, your Halloween season's over, you come back and change it to your normal list. You can choose whether or not you want the score sheets to automatically print after every game. And you can choose a few more score sheet settings here. Another function used pretty regularly is the playlists. So by default, you've got a playlist set up in CyberBlast Media, and it's set up to be sequential, which means the songs are going to go in the same order every time. If you change it to random, it'll change up the order every time you go through a game. And if you want to make your own playlist, simply put the music into a folder, and I'm going to make a new playlist here. First, I'm going to paste that address of the folder, so I'm putting it into this Kitty playlist folder. I'm going to name it Kitty Playlist. And now I can select that playlist anytime I want in the music config section. Once you change it, that playlist will take effect on the next game, and it will last until you come back and change it to something else. So this isn't something you want to change too often, but some places will have a playlist that's more suitable for kids, one for adults. They'll change it for seasons, like Christmas or Halloween. Okay. Under the config display window, you can change the language of the software. Again, you shouldn't really need to use this that often. The two things you might use in here are the game turnover timer and the game time on the phasers. If you check the turnover timer box, on the bottom of the screen between games, it will count up to show you how long it's been since the previous game was started. And that can just help give you an indicator from your front counter if things are running okay in the laser tag section. There's also the game time on phasers. If you check that box, the back of the phaser screen is going to show how much time remains. Some operators want to turn that off in case they have to adjust the game time due to extenuating circumstances. On the Arena hardware screen, there's a lot of detailed setup. There's not much here we're going to work with here though. Some of the main options you might change are this start button mode. You can choose whether it's quick start or vesting and startup. So if you have it set to quick start, if you press the yellow button, the push button in your vesting room wall, the game will automatically start up regardless of what mode the system's in. If we put it in vesting / startup, the first press will send vesting mode out to the packs. The second press will actually start the game. If you're using membership, you want to do it that way so that players have a chance to badge in before they start. Hide monitor for PowerPoint. If you check this box, the scoreboard will shrink itself after 5 minutes of inactivity after games are over. And this way you can have background images or slideshows going through on your scoreboard to advertise special offers. The other functions we might use are here in the Cyber Terminal. So this is where we set up how the scoreboard works. This should be set to the display on the second monitor, and that'll automatically go to the right place. But if for some reason, for instance, your monitor gets disconnected, you can always come back in here and reset it to the proper screen. The game recap time is the length that scores will show up after a game starts before it'll revert to live action. Typically you want this at 3 to 4 minutes to give players a chance to see their scores after they exit before the next game's scores override theirs. And down at the bottom you can set the background image. So all you got to do is paste the location of your image file and it'll replace the background on the scoreboard. You can do that to put your logo in the corner or put some sort of in-store advertising out on your lobby scoreboard. Up here is the phaser idle time. So this value can be set to anything from 1 minute to 180 minutes. And that's the length of time phasers will stay active and online before turning off if there's no games played. So every time you start a game, this timer resets. Typically you want this at around 2 hours, which is 120 minutes. and that way you're not having to turn phasers back on throughout the day, but you're also saving power. So if you're very slow on, say, a Monday or Tuesday, they're not running the battery all day long. Alright, another option under Arena Config, we can change your score sheet layouts. So we click the score sheet definitions button, pick the one we want to edit, and click edit. Now we can make sure the right printer is picked. And we can adjust the margins. If you adjust the top margin, it's going to push the scores down from the top by that many inches. So here's 0.25. The left margin will push it from the left, 0.25. You can adjust the positioning and the size of the boxes just by dragging on the interface on the corners. Or you can grab and move the box. You can reorganize it however you like. So this is kind of our standard layout with the column of team stats, total score and rank on the left, player name and game time up on the top right, and then the scoring table with the full detail on the right, and the worst enemy here at the bottom. So that's going to tell you who tagged you the most throughout the game. These can be adjusted however you want, and once you're done, just click save, and those changes will take effect. If you want to test to make sure the score sheet lined up the way you think it did, you can go to Print Score Sheets. You can either print the entire game or just one player by selecting them and clicking Print Selected Players. You can also go back and see an extended history of previous games and print a past scorecard.